Mr. Frank Jensen had worked at Briar Ridge High longer than most teachers. A quiet, older man in his late 60s, he was known for his punctual broom sweeps and the worn radio he carried everywhere, playing old jazz quietly through static. But what most people didn't know was that Frank noticed things. He had no family of his own, no kids or grandkids, so he paid attention to the world around him. He noticed when a locker stayed shut for too long, when a student stopped eating lunch, when laughter disappeared from certain corners of the school. And lately, he had noticed Maya Whitmore. The lunch bell signaled freedom for most students, freedom to talk, to laugh, to roam the halls with friends. But for 15-year-old Maya Whitmore, the bell marked something else entirely: silence, escape, hiding. She was a slender girl with sharp eyes that always seemed to be searching for something. Maybe a way out, maybe just a reason to stay. She wore her hair tucked neatly behind her ears, always wore long sleeves, even on warm days, and carried her books close to her chest like a barrier. Maya didn't cause problems. Her teachers often described her as polite, focused, and bright. The kind of student who never disrupted class, who always had her homework done on time, and never asked for help, even when she needed it. But over the past few weeks, something had shifted. Every day, like clockwork, she would disappear just before lunch, her light footsteps echoing down the third-floor corridor. She'd slip quietly into the girls' bathroom near the old science wing, an area that barely saw foot traffic anymore. Then, a few minutes later, came the sound that turned his stomach inside out. Crying. Not loud, not attention-seeking. A soft, strangled kind of weeping. As though someone was trying their hardest not to be heard, but couldn't keep the pain inside anymore. It happened every day. Always the same time. Always the same stall, third from the door. At first, Frank told himself it wasn't his business. Kids had problems. High school could be a jungle. Maybe it was a breakup. Maybe family stuff. Maybe it would pass. But it didn't. He tried talking to her once. It was a Tuesday, just after lunch. Maya had just stepped out of the bathroom. Her face was blotchy, her eyes rimmed with red. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Frank offered her a warm smile. "Hey, Maya. Everything all right, sweetheart?" But the moment their eyes met, she stiffened, like a deer caught in headlights. Her body trembled as if she expected to be struck. Then, without a word, she bolted down the hall, her shoes squeaking against the tile. Frank just stood there, stunned. The next day, he walked into the school counselor's office. Miss Farley had her hands full with over 900 students and too many budget cuts. But Frank told her what he'd seen. The crying, the withdrawal, the fear in Maya's eyes. Miss Farley nodded, polite but distracted. "Thanks for letting me know. We'll look into it." Frank waited a beat. "You'll talk to her?" "She's been in already," Farley said with a tired sigh. "She insists everything's fine." It was clear, nothing would be done. Not really. Not unless Maya came forward herself. That night, Jensen sat in his small kitchen, nursing a cup of tea and staring out the window into the dark. His thoughts kept circling back to Maya, to the bathroom stall, to the way she ran. Something wasn't right. He went back over everything he'd noticed in the past few weeks. The timing, the silence, the stall, the crying. A perfect pattern. Predictable. And then, something else hit him. The school's hallway cameras, every corridor, every exit, were carefully monitored. But the girls' bathroom? No coverage. It was a blind spot. A place where someone could suffer and no one would ever see. On Thursday, just before noon, Frank stood quietly outside the third-floor restroom again. Like before, Maya slipped inside. The crying started. Timid at first, then heavier, longer, until it slowly faded into silence. But she didn't come out. Not for 10 minutes. Not for 20. Frank hesitated, then gently knocked on the door. No answer. He turned the handle and peeked in. Maya. The stalls were all open, except the third one. He took a step inside. "Maya, it's Mr. Jensen. Are you okay?" Still nothing. But when he reached the sink, his eyes fell on something small, something that hadn't been there earlier. A paper flower. Soft pink. Hand-folded. Placed delicately on the edge of the porcelain basin. It was slightly damp, as though someone had cried while holding it. Frank reached for it with trembling fingers. It was intricate, far too delicate to be a passing distraction. It had meaning, purpose. He turned back toward the stalls. But the third door was open now, and Maya was gone. She never came back to school after that day. No one knew why. Her name was called in homeroom for a week, then quietly removed from the list. Teachers mumbled about a transfer. Some students said she moved to live with an aunt, but no one really knew. Only Frank remembered the fear in her eyes. Only Frank noticed the crying. And only Frank held the flower, the final trace of a girl who had silently begged for someone to hear her before she disappeared. And that night, as he locked up the school, Frank noticed something strange. The bathroom lights on the third floor were still on, and inside, on the sink, another folded flower. But Maya hadn't been back. Had she? For the first few days, no one at Briar Ridge High noticed Maya was gone. She wasn't the type to cause a stir, quiet in class, soft-spoken, often walking alone in the halls with her ballet-flat footsteps echoing softly behind louder, more boisterous groups. But for Mr. Jensen, the janitor who swept the same third-floor hall every lunch hour, her absence was loud, louder than her sobs had ever been. The bathroom was silent now. The third stall stood open. The cracked floor tile that sat just outside it stared back at him like a forgotten gravestone. And then there were the flowers. Every morning since Maya vanished, Jensen had found a new paper flower on the sink. Always folded carefully. Always pink. Always damp. He picked them up gently, never speaking a word of them to anyone. He placed them in a small drawer behind the custodial closet near the boiler room, an odd bouquet that didn't belong anywhere else. By day 3, whispers started among the students. Some said Maya had the flu. Others claimed she was suspended. A few, those who knew her well, said she was just sick, but their eyes didn't match their words. Jensen didn't like it. On Friday, he did something he hadn't done in years. He used his master key and let himself into the front office during lunch, when the staff was in the faculty room. He opened the attendance ledger. Yes, the school still kept a physical copy. For redundancy, the principal insisted. Maya Whitmore. 5 consecutive absences. Marked excused. No doctor's note. No parent signature. No additional detail. Just the stamped word, excused. It made Jensen's skin crawl. He closed the ledger quietly and locked the door behind him. Later that day, he found Miss Farley, the school counselor, in the library. She was sorting through pamphlets about college prep and mental health awareness, her hands shaking slightly, though she pretended they weren't. "Excuse me," Jensen said, clearing his throat. "Maya's still out." Farley didn't look up. "Yes. Her parents said she's not feeling well." "She's okay then?" There was a pause, too long for comfort. Then Farley offered a thin, unconvincing smile. "She'll be back soon, Mr. Jensen. No need to worry." But he did worry. He worried that Farley hadn't asked enough questions. That maybe she didn't want to know more. That maybe someone had told her not to. A chill ran through him. Over the weekend, he returned to the school under the guise of routine maintenance. The building creaked like an old ship in a storm. Pipes groaning, vents whispering secrets. He stood outside the girls' restroom on the 3rd floor and found the 6th flower. Folded. Perfect. Left on the sink like a whisper. On Monday morning, a strange hush fell over Briar Ridge. It wasn't the usual post-weekend sluggishness. It was something else. An undercurrent. As the first period bell rang, Jensen caught the shift. A group of students in the hallway stopped mid-laughter, their eyes fixed on something just beyond the main doors. Jensen turned and followed their gaze. There, stepping through the entrance like a ghost, was Maya. She looked thinner. Her cheeks hollowed slightly. Her long black hair hung limp. Her pink backpack, once decorated with little charms, was now bare. But it was her eyes that silenced the hall. They were vacant, dark, as though someone had flipped a switch inside her and cut the power. She didn't speak, not to anyone. When her friends approached, those who had claimed she was just sick, she gave them a small nod, then kept walking, her gaze fixed straight ahead. During lunch, she didn't go to the cafeteria. She didn't go to the bathroom either. She sat in the library, unmoving, her fingers lightly brushing the spine of a book she never opened. Jensen watched from a distance. The feeling in his gut didn't ease. If anything, it grew heavier. Something had happened to her. He didn't know what. He didn't know where. But he was certain of one thing. Maya hadn't come back. Not really. And he still hadn't stopped finding the flowers. That afternoon, Jensen unlocked the 3rd floor girls' bathroom to clean. The lights flickered overhead as usual. The air felt colder than usual. And on the mirror, drawn in condensation from a still warm pipe overhead, were 4 words. "Help me." He watches. Maya was back. At least, her body was. She moved through the school like a shadow of herself, silent, rigid, never lingering too long in one place. Her face remained unreadable, but every day, at exactly 12:10 p.m., she returned to the same place. The third-floor girls' bathroom. Third stall. Same as before. Mr. Jensen noticed the change immediately. It wasn't the crying. He had come to expect that. It was the way it had changed. Before, Maya's sobs were muffled, controlled, like she didn't want anyone to hear. But now, the cries were shallow, desperate. They came in short bursts, then silenced unnaturally, like someone had stopped them. It didn't sit right. On a Tuesday, during his usual rounds, Jensen paused outside the bathroom door. The school had emptied out during lunch. It was unusually quiet. No footsteps, no chatter, just that one haunting sound bleeding softly through the door. Sobs, but also thuds, like something or someone hitting the wall. He waited a few seconds, heart pounding, then slowly opened the door. The crying stopped instantly. The lights buzzed overhead. He scanned the room. Only the third stall door was closed. Same cracked floor tile. Same hum from the overhead vent. But now, the metal latch on the stall hung broken, twisted as though forced. Jensen's eyes narrowed. He knew that lock had worked just days ago. He'd fixed it himself last year after a group of girls jammed it during a prank. And yet now, it dangled loose, snapped where it met the doorframe. "Hello," he called gently. No answer. He moved closer and lightly knocked. "Maya." Silence. Only the low drip from the faucet answered back. He pushed the door slowly. It creaked open. Empty. No Maya. No bag. No sign of her presence. Just the faint scent of lavender soap and a single pink paper flower lying on the toilet seat. He bent down, picked it up. It was freshly folded. Damp. He turned quickly and looked around again. No sound. No movement. The bathroom was empty. But when he walked out into the hallway, something else struck him. No one had walked in. No one had walked out. He was sure of it. The hallway security camera didn't cover the bathroom door, but it did cover the adjacent hallway. Jensen had been standing there for nearly 5 minutes before entering. How had she gotten out? Or worse, who else had been in there? That night, Jensen stayed after school. He told the custodial supervisor he had a backed-up sink to inspect. He waited until the last teacher's car pulled away and the lights inside the office flicked off. The third-floor hallway sat still, its old heating pipes hissing like a whispering warning. He leaned against the wall near the bathroom door. Waited. 8:30 p.m. The janitor's walkie-talkie buzzed once, static, then silence. He clicked it off. No one else was on his channel tonight. And then he heard it. Inside the bathroom, a voice. Low. Muffled. Not Maya's. It didn't sound like a girl at all. The voice rose once, then dropped again to a whisper. Jensen crept closer, heart thudding. The voice continued, soft, rhythmic, almost coaxing. And then, suddenly, a sob. Maya's voice. Trembling. Jensen froze. His hand hovered near the doorknob. Then, a second thud. Metal striking tile. A sharp intake of breath. He swung open the door. Silence. Every stall wide open. Nothing inside. No voices. No footsteps. No Maya. Just one thing had changed. This time, the mirror above the sink had a smear across it, as though a hand had dragged down its foggy surface. And at the bottom of the mirror, scrawled faintly in what looked like red ink, were 3 words. He comes back. Mr. Jensen had always been a quiet man. He fixed what was broken, mopped what was dirty, and minded his own business. But some things couldn't be ignored. Maya was one of them. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was a question no one wanted to ask, a wound no one wanted to treat. And now, Mr. Jensen was convinced something was very wrong. After that night, after the bathroom whispering, the handprint on the mirror, and the chilling message, he knew watching and waiting wasn't enough. The school administration had brushed him off. The counselor logged his concerns, but never followed up. So Jensen did what the system refused to do. He acted. He knew where the hallway cameras ended. He also knew exactly where to position a small, motion-sensitive camera from his old maintenance kit, just above the exit sign outside the girls' bathroom door. It wouldn't capture the inside, of course, but it would show who went in and when. The camera was old, left over from a now-defunct security upgrade, but it worked. He wired it discreetly and checked the feed using his own laptop tucked away in the boiler room. Day 1. Lunchtime. The camera blinked to life. Maya entered the bathroom at 12:11 p.m. Exactly 3 minutes later, Principal Thomas Carter appeared, not walking casually, purposefully, looking side to side before slipping inside. Jensen stared at the screen. Why would the principal go into the girls' bathroom during lunch, while a student was inside? Carter exited 2 minutes later, straightening his tie. Maya didn't come out for another 20 minutes. Her head was low, shoulders hunched. Day 2. It happened again. Same pattern. Same time. This time, Carter looked more confident, almost rehearsed. Maya entered. Carter followed. 2 minutes in, 2 minutes out. Maya lingered until 12:35. This time, Jensen noticed something else. When she exited, she glanced up at the hallway camera as if trying to find something. Not his hidden camera, but the school's. A flicker of fear crossed her face. Day 3. Jensen barely slept the night before. He sat with his laptop open, watching the time tick closer to noon. At 12:09, Maya appeared again. Her movements were slower this time, almost mechanical, like someone walking through a bad dream they couldn't wake up from. At 12:12, Principal Carter returned. Same routine. Only this time, Carter stayed longer, for minutes. Jensen stared, barely blinking. When Carter finally stepped out, he was buttoning his jacket. He didn't look up. He walked quickly out of frame. But Maya didn't leave right away. It took her another 10 minutes to emerge. When she did, her face was pale. Her hands, clearly visible in the frame, were shaking. Not from cold, not from nervousness, from trauma. She looked behind her twice before walking down the hall. Jensen paused the footage, zoomed in. Her eyes were wet, not just tears. There was something in them. Panic, dread. As he watched, a lump formed in his throat. He had no daughter of his own. But in that moment, Maya was every student the system failed. Every unheard cry. Every adult that looked away. Not him. Not this time. He copied the footage to a flash drive. Then, Jensen did something he hadn't done in years. He picked up the phone. But he didn't call the school. He called someone who used to believe kids deserved better. Someone who once chased justice at Briar Ridge High, before retiring quietly after her warnings were ignored. Her name was Detective Marla Boone. And when she answered, her first words were, "It's about Maya, isn't it?" That night, Jensen watched the footage again. But this time, he noticed something he hadn't before. In the seconds before Maya leaves the bathroom, the camera catches a shadow, brief, slight, moving just behind the frosted window on the bathroom door. It was taller than Maya, and it hadn't left with Carter. Mr. Jensen stared at the flash drive in his hand, feeling its weight like a loaded secret. The footage on it wasn't just troubling, it was incriminating. After 3 days of surveillance, he had recorded the school principal, Thomas Carter, entering the girls' bathroom while a student was inside. Repeatedly, deliberately, and each time, Maya came out visibly shaken. The school deserved to know. But more importantly, Maya deserved protection. Mr. Jensen knew who to approach. Not Carter. Not the counselor who had ignored his earlier concerns. He chose Vice Principal Ayers, the only staff member who had once spoken up against Carter during a tense school board debate about funding. She had backbone, or at least, she used to. He waited until after school hours. Her office light was still on. "Mrs. Ayers," he said, stepping into the room. "I have something you need to see." She looked up, tired eyes blinking behind glasses. "Mr. Jensen?" He plugged in the flash drive. No preamble, just played the video. Maya enters the bathroom. Carter follows minutes later. Ayers' lips tightened. She leaned closer as Carter appeared again on screen and left. Maya followed 10 minutes later, trembling. Jensen paused it. "Well," he asked. A long silence. Then Ayers sat back, slowly removing her glasses. "There's context you don't understand," she said quietly. "What context could make this okay?" "I'm not saying it's okay," she said, voice almost a whisper. "I'm saying there's more to this than you know, and it's not your place to unravel it." "Whose place is it then?" he snapped. But she didn't answer, just closed her laptop, pushed back her chair, and said, "Leave this with me." But Jensen didn't. He yanked the flash drive out and walked out of the room without another word. That night, he made 2 more copies of the footage. One stayed with him. One was hidden, taped behind a loose panel in the janitor's supply closet. Old habits from earlier years, when covering your tracks meant keeping your truth safe from those who didn't want it told. The next morning, the school was tense. Lights flickered in the halls. And just before noon, the building went dark. A full power outage, Security systems shut down. The cafeteria paused its lunch service. Students were ushered to class in low light. Mr. Jensen's gut twisted. He ran to the server room. He'd helped install the hallway camera wiring himself years ago. There was a backup battery system designed to protect data during outages. But when he got there, the school's IT tech was already inside, frowning at a blank screen. "It's gone," the tech muttered. "All of it. External hallway feeds from the last 5 days, just wiped." "Wiped? How?" The tech shook his head. Something scrambled the backup system. Could have been the outage, or someone knew how to use it. Later that day, Principal Carter gave a short announcement over the intercom. "Due to unforeseen technical issues, some of our security footage was lost. We'll be working to restore full function over the next few days. Thank you for your patience." Jensen clenched his fists. The footage had been erased. Conveniently. A coincidence? Or a cover-up? He walked to the maintenance closet, opened the door, closed it behind him, and there it was, his backup flash drive, still taped behind the panel, untouched. That evening, as he prepared to call the district office, Jensen noticed something strange. The janitor's closet light, wired to a switch only he used, was on when he arrived. He looked around. His flash drive was still there, but next to it was a small folded paper. Not from Maya, not from any student. It was the same kind of hand-folded paper flower he'd found on the bathroom sink the day Maya vanished for a week. Except this time, scrawled inside the folds, were 4 chilling words. "You're being watched too." Mr. Jensen sat in the dim back corner of the school library, surrounded by file boxes coated in dust. The place had barely been touched in years. What began as a janitor's concern had now become something much larger, something that smelled of systemic rot. He'd just discovered that the camera footage he submitted had mysteriously vanished. Worse yet, Vice Principal Ayers, the one person he thought might help, had gone silent, avoiding him in the halls, avoiding eye contact. It was time to stop playing polite. He went where no one else ever bothered to look, the archive room, buried behind the administrative wing. There, he found incident reports dating back 10 years. Most were routine, student scuffles, locker damage, missing phones. But a certain category stood out, anonymous complaints. Dozens of them, all from girls, all vague, and all redacted or retracted within a week of submission. Some were labeled with odd footnotes. Student met with counselor. No further action. Parent withdrew concern after private meeting with Principal Carter. Matter resolved. No investigation required. He felt sick. Then came a name he hadn't heard before. Alana Pierce. Withdrawn 3 years ago. No graduation records. No transfer request. Just disappeared from the system. Jensen noted the date of her withdrawal, then quietly stepped outside the school Wi-Fi range and opened a private browser window on his phone. Social media yielded nothing until a half-dead alumni forum revealed her last name listed under a thread titled, "People We Lost Touch With." There was an old email. He took a deep breath and sent her a message. She responded 3 days later. Subject line, "I remember. But why now?" They agreed to talk on a video call. Jensen, unsure of how to even start, simply asked, "Why did you leave Briar Ridge?" Alana stared through the screen. She was only 20 now, but her eyes looked older. "He told me he'd ruin me," she said. "I didn't even know what that meant at the time. Just that. I felt trapped." "Who?" Jensen asked, though he already knew. "Carter," she said flatly. "The principal. I never said his name back then, but I will now." Jensen's blood ran cold. Alana recounted how she'd been called in multiple times for disciplinary reasons that were never documented. She'd meet him in his office, and sometimes, if she cried, he'd let her go. "But it wasn't the office that scared me most," she said. "It was the girls' bathroom down the West Hall. You know the one. No cameras. Always quiet. He made me go there once. Told me to wait for him." Jensen covered his mouth with his hand. "You didn't tell anyone?" he asked. She shook her head. "I tried. Once. Told a counselor. My parents were called. Then a day later, I was expelled for violating school conduct. Nothing in writing. Just told not to come back." "Did anyone believe you?" he asked softly. "No," she said. "And I let it go because I was scared. But now, someone else is going through it, aren't they?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Alana added, with visible regret. "He always used the bathrooms, where there were no cameras. That's what he told me once. Privacy is policy. That's what he called it." That night, Jensen went back to the archive room. This time, he wasn't looking for students. He searched staff files. There, buried under Carter's own application and performance reviews, he found a sealed incident report from 15 years ago, when Carter was still just a vice principal at another school. The report was missing pages, redacted, but one line stood untouched. Allegation made by student regarding inappropriate contact. Location, female restroom. Result, student withdrawn. No further investigation. Mr. Jensen looked up, hands shaking. This wasn't a pattern. This was a blueprint. And Maya? She wasn't the first. But if he didn't act fast, she might be the last. It happened on a Thursday. Late morning. Maya had barely said a word all week. Her eyes were glassy, her frame thinner, her walk more cautious. She'd stopped making eye contact with anyone, not even with her teachers. Some whispered that she was just going through something, as if that excused their silence. But during second period algebra, Maya stood up from her desk and dropped like a stone. No warning, no sound, just a sickening thud that snapped the class to attention. Students gasped. One screamed. The teacher, momentarily stunned, rushed to her side. Maya's body trembled slightly before going still, eyes half open, lips pale. She was carried out on a stretcher by paramedics, unconscious. And that's when the rumors started flying. Mr. Jensen was mopping up a spill near the science lab when the nurse quietly approached him. Mr. Jensen, she said, voice low and urgent. Something's wrong. What do you mean? He asked. She hesitated, then leaned in, whispering. She has bruises. Upper arms, shoulder, lower back. She said she fell, but she trailed off. The pattern doesn't make sense. Mr. Jensen felt his gut twist. Did you tell the counselor? He asked. I'm mandated to report it, the nurse replied. But I went to the counselor's office. She wasn't there, so I left a note. Her parents are on their way now. A few hours later, Maya's parents arrived. They looked off, not distressed the way you'd expect. Confused, concerned, yes, but more bewildered than anything else. The father kept shaking his head. The mother wrung her hands tightly. When Maya was wheeled out, awake now, but silent, they hovered over her, trying to coax out answers. But she wouldn't say a word. And then, without explanation, they pulled her out of school. That night, an email pinged every staff inbox. Urgent all-staff meeting, 6:30 p.m., library. It was from Principal Carter. The subject line read, Incident Containment and Policy Reminders. No further details. Mr. Jensen arrived early, standing near the back, unnoticed. Most of the staff whispered as they filtered in. Was it about Maya? Something happened in class. I heard she was sick. Principal Carter entered 5 minutes late. He stood at the front with the same measured calm he always carried. But this time, something was different. There was tension in his jaw. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He cleared his throat. Good evening, everyone. I won't take much of your time tonight. As some of you may be aware, we had a minor health incident today involving one of our students. Out of respect for privacy, I won't name her. The student is stable and recovering. He paused. However, I want to remind everyone, especially staff in regular contact with students, that our communication channels must remain professional. We must avoid speculation, personal interference, or breaches of protocol. I shifted. A few murmurs rose. I've also been made aware, Carter continued, that certain staff members have taken it upon themselves to install unauthorized surveillance equipment on school property. Now silence. Dead, heavy silence. Mr. Jensen's throat tightened. Carter didn't name him. He didn't need to. Let me be clear, Carter said, slowly. Any further violations will be met with disciplinary action. I have spoken with the superintendent, and she is fully briefed. He offered a tight smile. Let's continue to provide a safe, focused learning environment. That's all. As the meeting dispersed, Mr. Jensen felt a hand on his arm. It was the nurse. Pale. Shaking. I checked Maya's records, she whispered. There's a missing entry from last week. A nurse visit I remember logging. It's gone. He looked at her, dread pooling in his chest. Someone was wiping files. And if they could delete a nurse log, they could delete anything. And someone, somewhere, wanted Maya's story erased. Mr. Jensen sat in his dim apartment, the lights off except for the blue glow of his computer screen. His hand trembled slightly as he hovered over the send button. The compressed video files were already uploaded. The message was written, the email address, untraceable. And the recipient? An investigative reporter named Lena Gray, known for exposing misconduct in local institutions. She once brought down a crooked youth detention center in the next county. Jensen had no idea if she'd open it, but he sent it anyway. Then he waited. The next morning, the headline broke. Video leaked from Briar Ridge High suggests principal's involvement in possible misconduct. The article came from an anonymous whistleblower and included 3 grainy stills from the footage. Principal Carter entering the girls' bathroom, always alone. Always during lunch. Always after Maya. By noon, the article had over 5,000 shares. By 2 p.m., the front of the school was flooded with parents holding signs, reporters holding microphones, and students whispering rumors they no longer had to keep quiet. The superintendent's office issued a brief statement. We are aware of allegations surrounding Principal Carter. An investigation is underway. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. The school was no longer just a school. It was a crime scene in waiting. That afternoon, 2 patrol cars rolled into the staff lot. Officers in dark blue entered the school with quiet authority. They weren't there for questions. They were there for Carter. But Carter was gone. The secretary, pale and stammering, told police he'd left earlier that morning, saying he had a personal emergency. His office door was locked. It took the officers less than a minute to force it open. The room was cold, immaculate, almost too neat. No computer, no phone. Drawers were mostly empty. Just a few spare pens, a stapler, some unused school supplies. But on the back shelf, behind a row of yearbooks from the 1990s, one of the officers found a small metallic box. Inside, a key, worn in brass, marked only with one word. Sublevel. A strange hush fell over the room. What sublevel? One officer asked. The vice principal, Mrs. Ayers, who had arrived at the scene, shook her head. We don't have a sublevel, she said, confused. At least, I don't think we do. The older officer, the one who had opened the desk, stepped forward. Every public school built between 1970 and 1990 was required to include storm shelters, he said. Usually underground. Mrs. Ayers blinked. I've worked here 10 years. No one's ever mentioned that. The officer didn't smile. They wouldn't. As word of Carter's disappearance spread, more witnesses came forward. A cafeteria aide admitted she'd seen Carter and Maya exit the same hallway more than once, though Carter claimed he was escorting her to counseling. Another staff member recalled a girl 3 years earlier, Alana Pierce, who had similar episodes of unexplained panic, bruises, silence. Her departure had never been questioned. It all added up now. Patterns, cover-ups, and fear. Outside, parents were demanding Carter's arrest. Inside, officers were combing through floor plans. But it was Mr. Jensen, standing just inside the hallway, who remembered something no one else did. 10 years earlier, during a pipe burst, he'd been ordered to store old equipment in a sealed stairwell door behind the theater stage. At the time, he was told it was an unnecessary access point. He remembered the heavy door, the rusted handle, and the old bolt that locked it from the outside. He turned to the lead officer and said 2 words. I know where it goes. The officers followed Jensen through the empty auditorium, backstage, to the far left wall. He pointed. The lead officer twisted the key. It clicked, and with a loud groan, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow flight of concrete steps descending into darkness. The air that rose from below was cold, stale, wrong, and on the wall just inside, someone had written something in marker. No cameras here, just ghosts. The heavy door groaned shut behind them. The officers, their flashlights slicing through years of darkness, stepped slowly down into the sublevel, each footfall echoing along the concrete stairwell. The air was damp, heavy with the sour scent of mildew, dust, and something older, something harder to name. This place wasn't just forgotten. It had been buried. The staircase bottomed out into a narrow corridor, lined with crumbling insulation and rusted water pipes. An old fuse box sparked quietly on one wall, still humming faintly with electricity. It was clear this space had once been active, maintained, maybe even authorized, but no longer. Mr. Jensen followed close behind the officers, his face pale, drawn, jaw clenched. He had worked in this school for over a decade, yet this was the first time he'd set foot down here. A janitor's keys had never unlocked this, which begged the question, who had been keeping it open? They passed an old boiler room, long cold. Then, tucked behind a false wall of rotting particle board, they found it. A door. Unmarked. Steel. Newer than the rest of the space. One officer tested the handle. Locked. Another stepped forward with a pry bar. The door gave with a screech of warped metal and opened into a room no larger than a supply closet. But it was no closet. It was an office. A single chair. A desk bolted to the wall. A coat hook with an old jacket still hanging from it. On the desk, a mug, a half-empty water bottle, a notepad. With dates, student names, observations. Beneath the desk, a locked filing cabinet. The officer knelt beside it, examining the latch. It hadn't been opened recently. Dust outlined the padlock perfectly. Still, it took only 30 seconds to break it open. What they found inside turned the quiet horror into something deeper. Folders. Dozens. Each labeled with a year. A grade level. A name. Every folder had contents. Photos. School forms. Counseling slips. Printouts of email exchanges. Scans of detention slips. Personal notes. Some had disturbing descriptions scrawled in the margins. Others included photos that had clearly been taken without the student's knowledge. Jensen leaned in. He recognized several names. Some were students who had since graduated. Others had transferred out mysteriously. A few had simply disappeared from school one day, and no one ever really explained why. The officers carefully began laying out the folders on the ground. One name stopped them cold. Maya Larson. Her folder was dated 2 weeks before her first recorded breakdown in the counselor's log. Jensen's stomach turned as the officer opened the manila file. Inside, a printed recital flyer for the fall talent show. Maya's name circled in red. Notes in shorthand. Lunch period. Withdrawn. Avoids eye contact. Follows commands. A printed hallway photo. Maya walking alone. Timestamped the same week she first began crying in the bathroom. And a page, a full page, with Maya's name at the top, and a list of psychological triggers. Fear responses. Preferred isolation times. A final note read, escalating soon. Must act carefully. Unstable. The room went silent. The officers looked at each other. One of them muttered, this wasn't just misconduct. This was the system. Jensen stepped back. The key. The sublevel. The folders. This wasn't about impulse or opportunity. It was organized, documented, and possibly protected. In a folder marked correspondence, one officer found 2 unsigned letters, both addressed to the Briar Ridge School Board. The letters warned of inappropriate interactions, unsupervised meetings, and misplaced disciplinary records. The dates? One from 4 years ago, one from last year. Both had been ignored. A pattern was forming, and it went beyond one man. Carter may have been the actor, but someone higher up had helped keep the curtain closed. The officers sealed the cabinet and labeled it as evidence. The room, once just a whisper in the walls of Briar Ridge, had become a war room of secrets. Before leaving, Jensen noticed something odd, an empty photo frame on the desk. Face down, the backing removed. Inside was a small torn scrap of paper. It read, Basement Vent Cover, West Wing. That was where Maya had once been seen walking alone. As the officers filed out of the sublevel, one carrying Maya's folder sealed in a bag, Jensen remained behind for a moment, his eyes scanning the walls. He touched the edge of the desk, then looked down at the floor. There, scuffed into the concrete, were heel marks. Small, uneven, like someone had tried to resist being pulled from that chair, or had tried to run. And just outside the door, the faintest trace of red. Lipstick. Maya didn't wear makeup. Someone else had been there. But who? And where were they now? It didn't take long once the footage surfaced. The video Mr. Jensen had kept hidden in a shoebox at the back of his supply closet, the one showing Principal Carter entering the girls' bathroom during school hours, ignited a firestorm. It spread fast across the internet, first in the local town's forums, then on regional news channels. Within 48 hours, it reached national outlets. What followed was an unraveling, an institution cracking at its seams. Principal Carter had vanished before police could confront him. His office had been cleared out in a hurry, papers shredded, drives wiped. But he didn't make it far. 2 states away, in a rundown roadside motel outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, U.S. Marshals found him. He was driving a rental car registered to a fake name, carrying $9,000 in cash. No cell phone, and in the trunk, a backpack, a laptop, and a folder labeled New Start. He was arrested on the spot, extradited in handcuffs. The story was on every screen in Briar Ridge the next morning. The following week, Principal Carter was charged to court and sentenced to life imprisonment for child molestation. Back home, the fallout had begun. Maya stayed home the week following Carter's arrest and sentence. But her absence felt different this time. Not like before. It wasn't fear that kept her away. It was rest. When she did return, it was quietly. No fanfare. No announcements. Until one day, just after the final bell, she walked into the gymnasium where a press conference was being held and stood beside the podium. The room fell silent. She looked smaller than ever. Pale. Still visibly fragile. But when she spoke, her voice, soft and clear, carried through the room like a ripple across water. I didn't think anyone saw me. I thought what happened to me didn't matter. But someone noticed. He didn't have a title. He didn't have power. He just saw. And he cared. And that was enough to save my life. Then she turned toward the back of the room, where Mr. Jensen stood, arms folded, baseball cap in hand, and nodded once. Maya gave a half-smile. One nod of celebration, but relief. It was the first time she had looked up without fear in months. The investigation was swift and brutal. A full audit of Briar Ridge High unearthed rot that had spread years deep. Old complaints once dismissed were reopened. Several staff members, those who had ignored, misreported, or buried warnings, were placed on administrative leave. Some resigned outright before questioning. The vice principal, Mrs. Ayers, who had told Jensen, "There's context you don't understand," was quietly removed weeks later. The superintendent issued a public apology and promised sweeping reform. New surveillance coverage, anonymous reporting platforms, quarterly mental health evaluations, and most importantly, mandatory background checks for all hires, no exceptions. As for Mr. Jensen, he never showed up for the meetings or the interviews. He refused the press calls, ignored the awards. He didn't want to be the center of attention. He just cleaned out his supply room one Friday afternoon, hung his keys on the hook, and left without a word. The only thing he left behind was a folded note on the janitor's desk. It read, "Keep watching. Someone always needs to be seen." He retired quietly that weekend, but his absence did not go unnoticed. The student body, moved by Maya's words and galvanized by what they'd witnessed, pooled money and petitioned the school board. 2 weeks later, a small ceremony was held in the hallway near the East Wing, the one Mr. Jensen used to mop every morning before sunrise. There, bolted into the wall beneath the window, was a bronze plaque. It read, "To the one who listened, in honor of Mr. Frank Jensen, for reminding us that silence is never nothing. You saved more than one life." Time passed. The headlines faded. Maya finished her semester from home, with tutoring provided by the district. Her parents, once paralyzed by helplessness, now stood firmer, more involved. Her father, a welder, built her a small art studio in their backyard. Her mother, once too afraid to ask questions, now asked everything, and listened harder than ever before. Maya painted, read, watched the clouds, and slowly, began to rebuild herself. One morning, not long after spring had returned to the valley, Maya rose early. She stepped outside, still in pajamas, clutching a warm mug between her hands. The sun was just cresting over the horizon, casting soft gold across the rooftops. Birds were waking, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her chest didn't ache. She watched the sun stretch over the grass. A breeze touched her cheeks, and then, without warning, without force, she smiled. Not everything was fixed. Some scars ran too deep for a full return to innocence. But something better had begun. A quiet revolution born not of rage, but of care. And at the center of it all, a janitor who noticed the tears no one else did. And a girl who found her voice, just in time.